I'm Emily Costa, and this is the Commodities Institute podcast. Today is February 19th, 2026, and we have a packed episode that really captures how interconnected and frankly fragile global commodity markets feel right now. Let's begin with agriculture, because what's happening on farms across the United States tells us a lot about risk, resilience, and how producers respond when margins disappear. US farmers are heading into another planting season where profits are elusive at best. Corn prices are hovering near break-even levels, soybeans look even more uncertain, and yet corn acres are expected to remain historically high. That may sound counterintuitive, but when you slow it down, it makes sense. Corn yields far more grain per acre than soybeans, and when demand from ethanol producers and export buyers stays strong, it offers farmers at least a fighting chance. Many are cutting costs everywhere else, delaying equipment upgrades, trimming fertilizer use, and pouring what capital they have into corn. It's not optimism driving these decisions, it's survival. That pressure doesn't stop at US borders. In southern Brazil, recent rains have offered relief to drought-stressed soybean fields in Rio Grande do Sul, stabilizing production prospects after weeks of concern. Brazil is still on track for a record soybean crop overall, which reinforces why US farmers see soybeans as politically and commercially risky. When Brazilian supply is abundant and China's buying patterns are uncertain, soybeans become a tougher bet. Corn, for all its challenges, feels more predictable. From the fields, let's move underground to metals, where strategic priorities are shifting fast. Rio Tinto just reported flat annual earnings, weighed down by weaker iron ore prices. But the real story is copper. Copper prices rose sharply last year, output increased, and copper is now the growth engine miners are chasing. Demand from data centers, electrification, and clean energy infrastructure is rewriting boardroom strategies. That's why Rio Tinto's failed merger talks with Glencore mattered so much. It wasn't about scale for scale's sake. It was about copper exposure, long-life assets, and future relevance. That strategic scramble is even more pronounced in Central Africa. The Democratic Republic of Congo is offering the United States access to critical mineral projects, including tantalum, lithium, and copper cobalt assets, as part of the Minerals Cooperation Framework. One tantalum deposit alone accounts for roughly 15% of global coltan supply, a reminder that the materials powering smartphones, semiconductors, and aerospace systems often come from politically fragile regions. The promise being made is traceable, conflict-free supply chains. The reality is far messier, with security, sovereignty, and local livelihoods all hanging in the balance. Now let's turn to oil, where geopolitics and profitability are colliding in a very visible way. US refiners are lining up to buy heavy crude directly from PDVSA, Venezuela's state oil company. Companies like Phillips 66 and Citgo Petroleum want to cut out intermediaries and secure barrels at deeper discounts. Heavy Venezuelan crude is well suited to Gulf Coast refineries, and with recent US licensing changes, the commercial logic is hard to ignore. Discounts of $9 to $10 per barrel below Brent make a real difference when margins are tight. But this isn't a simple reopening of trade. Sanctions compliance remains complex, banks are cautious, and Venezuela's loading infrastructure is stretched thin. Ship-to-ship transfers are expensive, vessels are limited, and regulatory fine-tuning in Washington could still reshape who can buy what and when. Still, the direction of travel is clear. Venezuelan oil is flowing back toward the United States and away from China, changing pricing dynamics across the Atlantic basin. At the same time, in North Africa, Libya is quietly redrawing its fuel supply map. Western trading houses have won tenders to supply gasoline and diesel, sharply reducing imports from Russia. Libya produces plenty of crude but lacks refining capacity, so fuel imports are essential. By awarding tenders instead of swapping crude for fuel, Libya is professionalizing its market and opening doors for large Western players. Russian fuel flows, once dominant, have fallen dramatically. It's another example of how sanctions and geopolitics ripple through trade routes, often in unexpected ways. Energy security anxieties aren't limited to oil. In Europe, Austria is openly questioning whether replacing Russian gas with US liquefied natural gas simply swaps one dependency for another. Austria is pushing harder on renewables and exploring gas imports from Africa and the Black Sea. The message is nuanced but important. Domestic energy is seen as more reliable, but gas remains necessary for stability. The challenge is learning how to live with dependencies without becoming vulnerable to them. That vulnerability is painfully clear in Ukraine, where energy infrastructure remains under attack. Canada has stepped up support, offering equipment, investment, and technical cooperation aimed not just at rebuilding, but modernizing Ukraine's energy system under extreme pressure. When temperatures plunge and power grids fail, energy security stops being an abstract policy debate and becomes a matter of daily survival. Before we wrap up, let's touch briefly on trade flows. In Argentina, labor strikes by maritime and oilseed workers have effectively frozen grain shipments at key ports. Argentina is one of the world's largest exporters of soybean products, and even short disruptions can ripple through global feed and food markets. Labor reform, politics, and logistics are colliding right at the ports, reminding us that commodities don't move on spreadsheets. They move on ships, through terminals, and by the work of people whose livelihoods are on the line. When you step back from all of this, a common thread emerges. Whether it's farmers planting corn, refiners chasing discounted crude, miners pivoting toward copper, or governments rethinking energy dependencies, everyone is making defensive choices in an uncertain world. Margins are thin, risks are high, and long-term strategy often collides with short-term necessity. That's where we'll leave it today. If you found this episode valuable, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review.